The starting point on the discussion on sanctions is to accept that there are two types of sanctions. There are sanctions you impose upon yourself. That's the number one sanction you should discuss. Then there's another type of sanction which are imposed on you by foreigners, by outsiders. My interest, my bone of contention is that as Zimbabweans, we must address those sanctions we are imposing upon ourselves. Misgovernance, corruption, rigging elections, poor country governance, murdering our own people. Those are sanctions we are imposing upon ourselves. So I'm not even interested in discussing the number two type of sanction, because we as Zimbabweans are not solving the sanctions we are imposing upon ourselves. Shame on us. Why would you want others to remove sanctions on you when you're busy imposing sanctions on yourself? So that must be understood as the foundational discussion. What are the sanctions that Zimbabweans are imposing upon themselves? What are they doing about it? Let's answer that question first. When we have done that, then we can say, okay, let's look at the sanctions that are being imposed upon us by other people. I have never defended the imposition of sanctions on my country. When I was a political leader in Zimbabwe, when I was Deputy Prime Minister, I was very clear that sanctions by external players undermine the prosperity and the progress of the country. But I'm not even prepared to have that discussion about the sanctions from America, about the sanctions from Europe, because I'm busy as a Zimbabwean imposing sanctions on myself. So I have no moral authority, no basis to discuss the sanctions imposed by other people. Let us remove the sanctions we are imposing on ourselves. Then we can have a conversation about the sanctions imposed upon us by other people. I think we need to have Zimbabweans working together in the national interest. The elections were on the 30th of July, 2018. It's almost 8 months later now. Why can't we somehow find a way of putting Zimbabwe first? Yes, the election was disputed. Yes, there were challenges around legitimacy and so on, but we can't be talking about elections for the next 5 years. We must talk about the economy. We must talk about business. We must talk about our currency. We must talk about productivity. So that can't be left to politicians. It has to be an inclusive dialogue. The opposition, the MDC alliance, the key opposition, they must be respected, by the way, as the opposition. Don't bring 20 other little lumpen elements and call them the opposition. Respect them as the opposition. And then the ruling party, ZANU-PF, then civic society, then the business. They must come together and somehow work on reforms to make our future elections less disputed. Work on the economy. For example, currency. We just had the monetary policy in Zimbabwe. Disaster. Before you introduce a new currency, you need 4 things. You need confidence in the system, in the people of Zimbabwe. There's no confidence at the moment. You need to make sure there are reserves to back up the currency. You need to make sure you cut down on expenditure. Fiscal consolidation, very important. Then number 4, more importantly, productivity. There's no difference. Mugabe left in 2017 through a coup d'etat. You must not forget that. That's the foundation of Zimbabwe. The foundation of Zimbabwe is a coup d'etat. Emerson Mnangagwa is a product of the army. Forget the election in 2018. That was just a cosmetic activity to endorse a coup d'etat. So the army, by carrying out a coup d'etat in 2017, created a regime that they control. So Mnangagwa, Chiwenga, the army are one entity, which is the military establishment. You can never build a democracy, you can never build a good foundation on the basis of a coup d'etat. So we have challenges there. The foundation is flawed. As Zimbabweans, we must be masters of our own destiny. We cannot continuously outsource the resolution of our problems. Somehow, the buck stops with us as Zimbabweans. That's number 1. Number 2, South Africa, they must understand that under globalization, South Africa is not competitive if Zimbabwe is not attractive. South Africa will not progress if there is destruction of value in Botswana or Mozambique. We are now moving away from national competitiveness to regional competitiveness. We are now moving away from national attractiveness to regional attractiveness. So the South Africans must take a vested interest approach to the resolution of the crisis in Zimbabwe, because our survival, our prosperity brings about an environment where they can prosper better. Secondly, SADC. SADC again should understand that we are now saying the region is a better unit of analysis than the nation state. The numbers themselves, 12 million people in Zimbabwe, 50 million people in South Africa, these are chicken change. When you talk about SADC, when you talk about COMESA, when you talk about the African continent is 1.2 billion people. So numbers make a difference under globalization. So we must realize that South Africa's survival, Zimbabwe's survival, is going to come from SADC, from COMESA, from the African Union. Continental integration and continental unity are the basis of our survival under globalization. So we need to emphasize regional sovereignty, emphasize continental sovereignty as opposed to national sovereignty. So SADC is very important, the AU is very important, and they must help their member states to resolve their matters so that we can prosper as Africans across the board. They've done nothing. In fact, they are worse than Mugabe on every front. Chiwenga and Mnangagwa were the enforcers of Robert Mugabe. Chiwenga and Mnangagwa were the front, henchmen. They were the runners of the system that Mugabe created. So you don't expect any difference between the behavior of Mnangagwa and the behavior of Robert Mugabe. What's disturbing is that, in fact, in terms of brutality, in terms of corruption, in terms of misgovernance, Mnangagwa is worse than Robert Mugabe. What a tragedy. Right now, I'm busy writing because I think writing is important. We don't do enough writing. Documentation is divine. Writing is important. Our change makers, civic society, business people, the politicians do not write. I've just given an example of President Mugabe, 57 years of front-end action, 0 books. Look at Thatcher, she's got 3 books. Obama, 3 books and still writing. Blair has written, Bill Clinton has written, Hillary. The Western culture, the leaders, business, civic society, and the public leaders do write. What I want to do is to walk the talk. And so I'm busy writing. I'm now on volume 3. However, since these guys are messing up the country, I might have to come out of retirement and become a political gangster one more time. But for now, let's write. But keep my options open.